My name is Clara Bennett, I am 32 years old, and for 6 long years I carried the full financial weight of my parents' entire household on my shoulders alone. I worked as a senior project manager at a well-established tech firm, pulling brutal overtime hours week after week, turning down a once-in-a-lifetime overseas career opportunity, putting off my wedding plans year after year, pausing my down payment savings for my own house, and cutting nearly every personal pleasure out of my life so my mother and father could enjoy a comfortable, worry-free retirement. Every single month, without fail, I sent an automatic transfer of $3,400. This money covered their mortgage, top UPS, all utility bills, grocery shopping, prescription medications, annual home maintenance, car insurance, doctor visit copays, holiday spending, and even random impulse purchases they liked to make. I never asked for repayment. I never demanded thanks. I did it out of love, because I believed blood ties meant you show up for your family, no matter the personal cost. Growing up, I was always the reliable child in the family. I was the one who got good grades, kept out of trouble, built a stable career, and always dropped everything the second my parents called for help. If my mom needed someone to drive her to medical appointments, I cleared my work calendar. If my dad needed help repairing something around the house on my only weekend off, I showed up with tools in hand. When they argued over money, I would listen for hours on the phone, offering comfort and practical solutions. Meanwhile, my cousin Jackson, my mother's sister's son, had always been coddled by my parents. Jackson was 25, he hopped from one dead-end job to the next, racked up massive credit card debt, spent money recklessly on gaming gear, concert tickets and weekend trips, and almost never visited or called my parents. He rarely brought them gifts, never helped around the house, and had never contributed a single dollar toward their living expenses. Yet my parents constantly made excuses for him. They would say he had a hard start in life, that he lacked proper guidance, that he needed more compassion and second chances. To their faces I tried to be understanding, telling myself family means you support the struggling ones. Deep down I told myself my loyalty would still be rewarded. I was their biological daughter. Surely whatever assets they built over decades would at least be split fairly between me and Jackson. That naive illusion shattered completely on my father's 60-year-old birthday banquet, in front of dozens of gathered relatives. What makes this betrayal even more gut-wrenching is that I was never just a financial ATM for my parents, I was their full-time emotional crutch, their emergency backup, their fixer for every single problem life threw their way. Long before the monthly payment started, long before I had a 6-figure salary, I was trained to be the giver. Since high school, I'd been the child who never partied too hard, never stayed out late, never caused stress. While other teenagers saved money for new clothes or road trips, I saved my part-time job earnings to pay my parents' summer electric bills. While my college friends spent their breaks traveling home to relax with family, I spent mine deep cleaning my parents' house, fixing their broken appliances, sitting with my mom through her anxiety spells, and comforting my dad when work stressed him out. I grew up with one unspoken rule drilled into my brain from childhood: our family's peace depends on you being good, being quiet, being helpful, and never being a burden. That rule shaped every choice I made in my 20s. When I graduated college with honors and landed my first corporate role, my parents did not celebrate my achievement. Instead, they sighed with visible relief and said, "Finally, someone in this family can carry the load." That sentence should have warned me. That sentence should have told me I was never loved as a daughter, only valued as a solution to their financial stress. But I was too loyal, too desperate to earn their unconditional pride, so I leaned in harder. I worked longer hours, took on more projects, refused raises that required relocation, and structured my entire life around their comfort zone. Jackson, on the other hand, was raised with zero expectations and endless grace. His mother, my aunt, had always been my mother's weak spot. My aunt was the younger sister, the struggling one, in the family narrative, and my mom spent her entire adult life trying to rescue her and her son from every consequence of their own poor choices. While I was disciplined for spending $20 on myself as a teen, Jackson was gifted brand new gaming consoles for failing school. While I worked 2 jobs to pay my own college textbook fees, Jackson received cash handouts every holiday with 0 strings attached. While I was told to be grateful for everything you have, Jackson was told, "The world owes you a break." Even as adults, the double standard was brutal and impossible to ignore. Whenever I missed a family dinner for work overtime, I was labeled selfish, cold, and career-obsessed. Whenever Jackson skipped entire holiday gatherings to party with friends, my parents laughed it off and said, "Boys will be boys, he's just living his youth." Whenever I asked for a small favor, like them watering my plants while I traveled for work, they complained about the hassle. Whenever Jackson needed a place to crash, cash to borrow, or someone to bail him out of trouble, they dropped everything instantly. For years, I swallowed that unfairness. I told myself maturity meant overlooking favoritism, that love meant being the bigger person, that one day my consistency would outshine Jackson's inconsistency in their eyes. The banquet was held at a large local hotel ballroom, decorated with gold streamers, fresh flower centerpieces, and framed old family photos lining every wall. Tables were filled with extended family, old family friends, neighbors, and former work colleagues of my father. It was supposed to be a happy celebration honoring my dad's 6 decades of life. I had spent nearly 2 weeks organizing this whole event. I booked the venue, negotiated the catering contract, selected every course on the menu, paid for all the decorations, ordered his custom 3-tier birthday cake, and covered half of the total banquet bill out of my own pocket. I arrived hours early, greeted guests at the entrance, helped my parents greet every attendee, fixed seating arrangements when relatives argued over where to sit, and smiled through the whole evening even when my feet ached from standing for hours. I thought this would just be another ordinary family gathering. I had absolutely no idea this public celebration would turn into the day I learned I had been completely written out of my parents' future. In the days leading up to the banquet, there were tiny, easy-to-dismiss oddities that I now recognize as critical red flags. My parents were unusually distant. They avoided talking about their future plans, dodged every question about retirement arrangements, and kept having hushed private phone calls with my aunt whenever I was in the room. Multiple times I walked in on them quickly closing laptop screens or hiding stacked paperwork on the dining table. When I asked what they were working on, they brushed me off with generic excuses about family paperwork and retirement updates. I never pushed. I trusted them. I truly believed they had nothing but good intentions toward me. I even spent extra money to make the day perfect for them. I upgraded the catering to premium seafood courses, added custom-printed anniversary and birthday memorabilia for display, and hired a professional photographer to capture family photos so they would have lasting memories. I wanted this day to be proof of my gratitude, my devotion, my love for them. I wanted them to look at me and see the daughter who always showed up, always cared, always sacrificed. Meanwhile, they were using this exact same day to publicly execute my place in the family legacy. Halfway through the dinner, after the main courses had been served and plates were being cleared away, my father stood up to give his official birthday speech. The room fell quiet, every guest turned their attention toward him. Soft background music faded out. He thanked everyone for traveling to come, spoke about his long marriage to my mother, recalled funny little memories from his younger working years, then he turned directly toward Jackson, who was sitting near the front table beside my aunt. He held up a thick stack of official printed legal documents for the whole room to see, lifting them high so people sitting all the way at the back could catch a glimpse of the paper. He announced proudly to every single person present that he and my mother had formally signed all their assets over to Jackson as an unconditional gift. The family house worth more than $700,000, 2 rental townhouses that brought in steady monthly rent, their stock investment portfolio, retirement savings, my grandmother's antique jewelry collection, vintage family heirlooms, and even the burial plots they had purchased for their later years. Every single thing. All of it belonged legally to Jackson. My father made it crystal clear in front of everybody, there was nothing reserved for me. No shared ownership, no partial inheritance, no cash set aside, no family keepsakes. Their own daughter would receive 0. He told the whole room that Jackson needed a solid future to get his life on track, and since I already had a high-paying stable job, I supposedly did not need any family legacy. He praised Jackson, called him the son they never had, and said these assets would give him the push he needed to finally succeed in life. The relatives around me began clapping. Many nodded along, agreeing that it was a kind, generous gesture. Some people even turned to Jackson and congratulated him loudly. What destroyed me most in that moment was not just the loss of assets, but the public humiliation and deliberate cruelty of their timing. This was not a private decision made out of confusion or fear. This was a theatrical performance designed to strip me of dignity in front of every person who knew our family story. Every relative in that room knew I was the child who supported my parents single-handedly. Every family friend knew how hard I worked to keep their household stable. Every neighbor had watched me show up week after week to help my parents while Jackson was nowhere to be seen. Yet my parents chose this stage, this audience, this celebratory moment to announce that my 6 years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice meant nothing to them. They wanted everyone to praise them as generous, compassionate people. They wanted to paint Jackson as a poor underdog they were heroically saving. And to make that narrative work, they needed to paint me as the privileged, unneedy daughter who could be discarded without guilt. They sacrificed my reputation, my dignity, and my birthright for social clout within the extended family. That was the part no one else understood that night. This was not kindness. This was calculated, intentional cruelty masked as charity. I sat frozen in my chair. My fork hovered above my half-eaten plate. My face burned hot with embarrassment, my hands went ice-cold underneath the table. Every guest around me heard every word of that speech. Nobody turned to check how I was feeling. Not my mom, not my dad. They never glanced in my direction for even a second. For 6 years I had drained my income, delayed my own life milestones, and bailed them out through every financial difficulty, while they had secretly prepared these legal papers for months, waiting for this big public banquet to announce that I had been completely disinherited. It was not a quiet private conversation behind closed doors. It was done in front of dozens of witnesses, to make themselves look noble and generous, all at my expense. I did not cause a scene. I did not scream, I did not cry, I did not slam my chair and storm out in front of all those people. I knew an outburst would let them paint me as bitter, ungrateful, throwing a petty tantrum over money on my father's special day. That was exactly the narrative they would push to every family member for years to come. Instead, I kept my composure. I kept a neutral, polite expression on my face while everyone around me continued clapping. I pulled my phone out under the table and quietly recorded short clips of my father's speech, making sure to capture the part where he held up the legal paperwork. Later that night, when most guests had left, I slipped into the quiet hotel lounge area where my parents had laid out the physical documents for a few close relatives to view. I took high-resolution photos of every signed page, witness signatures, legal clauses, and the official state gift transfer forms. I captured every piece of evidence. Once I was finished, I put everything back exactly how I found it. I smiled and wished my father happy birthday one final time, exchanged small polite goodbyes with lingering relatives, and drove home alone. The whole long drive back my mind was completely clear. My heart was heavy with hurt and betrayal, but I knew exactly what I needed to do. That night alone in my empty apartment, I finally let myself process everything I'd been ignoring for years. I cried not for the money, not for the houses, not for the inheritance I'd lost. I cried for the younger version of me, the teenage girl who worked weekends to help her parents pay bills, the 20-something girl who put her dreams on hold to keep her family stable, the loyal daughter who believed love was supposed to be reciprocal. I grieved the fact that I had spent my entire life trying to earn a love that was never going to be mine. I grieved the innocent hope that my parents would one day look at me and say, "Thank you." But after the tears came clarity. I realized I was not obligated to keep giving to people who kept taking. I was not obligated to keep sacrificing for people who actively worked to erase me from their future. I was not obligated to carry a one-sided love that only drained me and rewarded others. I made a silent promise to myself that night: I would never again let my kindness become my weakness. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is the channel where we share real stories of quiet, loyal people who finally draw hard boundaries against toxic family exploitation. Grab your drink, get comfortable, drop in the comments where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you love stories about self-respect and long overdue justice. This story is far more painful than you might expect. To understand how deep this betrayal ran, you have to go back 6 years to how all these monthly payments first began. Back then I had just received a major promotion at work. My salary jumped significantly, I had just got engaged, and my fiancé Ethan and I were drawing up detailed plans for our wedding and for buying our first home together. Life was finally looking bright for me. That was when my parents came to me with their plea for help. My aunt had been constantly leaning on them for money, and Jackson's reckless spending had landed the whole extended side of the family in deep financial trouble. My parents had dipped deep into their life savings to help Jackson clear his mounting debts, and suddenly they could barely cover their own household monthly costs. They sat in my small apartment living room one rainy weeknight, with tearful faces, holding my hands tightly, begging for my support. They told me they were too old to pick up extra part-time work. They told me I was their only hope. They swore to me that all their property and savings would one day be mine, as reward for my devotion. "You are our flesh and blood, Clara," my mother would repeat over and over. "Jackson just needs a little temporary help to get back on his feet. Everything will belong to you in the end." I trusted them completely. I believed those heartfelt promises. I turned down a lucrative overseas work posting that would have advanced my career tremendously, scaled back our elaborate wedding plans, halted my home savings fund, and set up that $3,400 automatic monthly transfer. What they never told me was that my aunt had already been planting seeds of favoritism in their minds for years before that rainy night. My aunt constantly reminded my mother that I would fly away and build my own life, while Jackson would need family roots to survive. She convinced my mother that successful children owe their success to struggling family members, that my stability was a reason to give more, and Jackson's instability was a reason to receive more. Slowly, quietly, they rewrote the family rules to exclude me from fairness, long before I ever knew it was happening. Year after year I kept sending that money without complaint. I paid for brand new roofing on their house after storm damage. I covered expensive multiple dental procedures for my mother. I paid their annual property tax bills in full. Whenever they texted saying they were short on cash for unexpected costs, I sent extra funds without asking many questions. Meanwhile, Jackson posted constantly on social media, new high-end gaming systems, weekend beach trips, brand-name sneakers, fancy dinners at expensive restaurants. He never visited my parents unless he expected cash or gifts. He never helped fix anything around their house. He never so much as sent them a birthday card paid for with his own money. Even so, my parents always defended him. They would tell me I was fortunate to have my good job, that I should not begrudge Jackson a chance in life. I watched Jackson live a carefree, reckless, reward-filled life while I buried myself in overtime, skipped vacations, denied myself small pleasures, and prioritized my parents' every need. I watched my parents cheer for his wins, excuse his failures, and celebrate his tiny improvements while ignoring my massive sacrifices entirely. I worked overtime to pay their mortgage while Jackson traveled on vacation. I skipped my own medical checkups to cover my mom's dental bills while Jackson bought designer clothes. I delayed my engagement party to pay their property taxes while Jackson dined at five-star restaurants. Small warning signs started popping up more than a year before that birthday banquet. Whenever I brought up my future, or mentioned how much I had sacrificed for them, they would push back. They would say things like, "You will make plenty of money on your own, Jackson has nobody else to fall back on." Every time I tried to reason with them about fairness, they guilt-tripped me, said I was being selfish and cold-hearted, and quickly changed the subject. I always backed down, hating family conflict. I hated the thought of creating division between us. I never guessed they were already drafting legal paperwork to hand every single asset over to my cousin. The birthday banquet was just their public reveal. Looking back, those small arguments were their way of testing my boundaries. Every time I backed down, every time I forgave their unfair words, every time I chose peace over standing up for myself, they grew bolder. They realized I would never confront them, never create drama, never expose their favoritism. They realized they could keep taking from me indefinitely while planning a future that excluded me entirely. The night after the banquet, I sat alone at my dining table late into the night and compiled every record of money I had given them across those 6 years. Bank statements, transfer confirmations, receipts for home repairs, receipts for the birthday banquet I partially funded, screenshots of extra emergency money I had wired over in crises. I added every single dollar. Over 6 years I had given them more than $228,000 of my hard-earned income. That was money that should have gone toward my wedding, my house, my own future security. All of it had gone to sustain their comfortable lifestyle, and indirectly fund Jackson's careless spending. I built a firm, step-by-step plan. No angry messages, no dramatic confrontations. Just quiet, permanent financial separation. First, I canceled the $3,400 recurring monthly transfer that had run faithfully for 6 years. Second, I removed my payment information from every single one of their utility accounts, insurance portals, and household service providers, so they could no longer charge any bills to my cards or bank accounts. Third, I pulled all my emergency reserve funds out of the shared family bank account I had set up for their medical crises, moving every cent back into my private personal account. Fourth, I legally removed myself as their emergency contact and authorized signatory for all their property and banking documents. I did not send them a warning text. I did not call to explain myself. They made their huge life-changing decision publicly, behind my back, without consulting me. I was fully entitled to adjust my own finances in silence. I stopped being their safety net. For the first time in years, I started putting my own life first. For the next 30 days, there was total radio silence from my parents. Not one phone call, not one text message asking why the regular monthly money had stopped arriving. They never checked how I felt after that humiliating birthday banquet. They never apologized for publicly cutting me out of the inheritance in front of all our relatives. The few messages I received were trivial: photos of flowers in their backyard, a reminder about an upcoming family picnic. There was zero warmth, zero concern for my well-being. This silence spoke volumes. They did not miss their daughter. They missed my money. As long as the monthly payments kept flowing, I was their perfect, wonderful child. Once the money stopped, I became invisible. That month of silence was more hurtful than any argument could have been. It proved beyond any doubt that our entire relationship was transactional. When I was useful, I was loved. When I stopped being useful, I was ignored. They did not grieve my pain. They did not wonder if I was hurt. They simply waited passively for me to resume my financial duties, assuming I would continue sacrificing indefinitely out of blind familial obligation that without my regular $3,400 infusion, their household fell apart rapidly. Their pension alone was never enough to maintain the comfortable standard of living they had grown used to. For 6 years my transfers had filled every single budget gap. They had never built up a proper emergency fund, because they counted on me to always bail them out. And Jackson, now the legal owner of all their houses, savings, and investments, had absolutely no intention of spending any of that inherited wealth to support them. He started selling small portions of the investment funds to fund his vacations and new gadgets. He fully expected my parents would keep pushing me to restart the payments, so he could keep enjoying all the family assets without any responsibility. Jackson's arrogance knew no bounds. In his mind, he had won the family lottery effortlessly. He believed my parents' choice proved he was the favored child, the rightful heir, and that I was simply a bitter worker meant to serve the family. He had zero gratitude for the assets gifted to him, zero respect for my parents, and zero awareness that every penny of that legacy was built on my 6 years of endless labor and sacrifice. Late payment notices piled up quickly on their kitchen counter. Mortgage payments became impossible for them to cover. Utility companies sent formal written warnings about disconnection of power, water, and gas. They could barely afford groceries or refill their prescription medicine. The threat of eviction letters began arriving in their mailbox one after another. On day 31 after the birthday banquet, I was buried deep in urgent work deadlines at my office, juggling multiple project deliverables and back-to-back meetings. My phone lit up with a text message from my mother. No greeting, no, how are you? No small talk. Just a short, desperate transactional line: we are about to be evicted. That short message summed up everything about our broken relationship. After 6 years of sacrifice, the only time they urgently reached out to me was when my money dried up. I stared at those words for many minutes. I thought about typing a long detailed message listing every sacrifice I had made, recounting the birthday banquet speech, explaining how they had signed everything to Jackson. I typed paragraphs of hurt and frustration, laying out every memory of nights I skipped rest to earn money for them, every dream I had put aside. Then I deleted all of it. There was no point laying out my pain for people who had already chosen to exploit me intentionally. They would twist my honest hurt and frame me as bitter and vengeful. I was finished trying to justify myself. I typed 4 short unapologetic words and pressed send. Not my problem. I locked my phone and returned straight to my work. Inside me there was deep sadness, but no regret. For the first time in 6 years I was choosing myself over a family that had never chosen me. Right after my message delivered, my phone exploded with calls and texts. My mother called repeatedly, then my father, my aunt, and Jackson. They bombarded me nonstop for 3 days. Their messages followed the predictable manipulative pattern you see with so many toxic families. First came disbelief. Clara, this is not a joke. We are going to lose our home. Call us back right away. Then rage and outrage. You are acting childish. Stop this petty nonsense and grow up. Then heavy guilt tripping. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. How can you abandon your own parents when disaster is at our door? How can you be this ungrateful? Then health-based emotional manipulation. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. This stress will make him seriously ill. Do you want that on your conscience over some grudge? For 2 full days I ignored every call and every incoming text. I needed space to keep my own mental health intact and avoid being pulled back into their emotional whirlwind. On the 3rd day I answered one single call from my mother. She immediately launched into her usual guilt script, voice wounded and patronizing. Family must support each other unconditionally, Clara. You earn good money, you can easily help us. Why are you punishing us? I kept my tone steady, calm, no yelling, no tears. If family supports each other unconditionally, why did you stand up at Dad's 60th birthday banquet in front of every relative and sign every single asset over to Jackson, leaving your own daughter absolutely nothing? For 6 years I sent you thousands every month, sacrificing my wedding and my future home, while you gave everything to a cousin who has never lifted a finger for you. You wanted unconditional financial support from me, but you would not give me unconditional family loyalty in return. My mother was completely caught off guard. She never imagined I had seen the full legal documents or recorded parts of that banquet speech. For a beat she fell silent. Then she jumped straight into gaslighting. You misread everything. Those papers were just a safeguard for Jackson. You are blowing this way out of proportion. A safeguard does not mean gifting every house, every dollar of savings, and explicitly cutting me out completely, I replied plainly. This was permanent. This was fully intentional. I ended the call shortly after, and blocked their ability to leave voicemails. I was done engaging with their manipulation. Not long afterwards, my mother took a screenshot of my, "not my problem," reply and posted it in our huge extended family group chat with more than 45 relatives. She shared zero context. She never mentioned the birthday banquet speech, never mentioned the signed gift documents, never mentioned my 6 years of financial sacrifice. She only posted my reply alongside a long dramatic write-up painting me as the cruel villain, a selfish daughter abandoning her aging parents over nothing. Almost instantly most of the family turned against me. Distant cousins, aunts, uncles, family friends flooded the chat with judgmental comments shaming my character. Multiple people unfollowed my social media, sent passive-aggressive private messages, and some even reached out to my workplace to make vague complaints about my personality. For a while I was cast as the black sheep of the whole family. Almost nobody stopped to ask why the reliably devoted daughter would suddenly cut off years of consistent support. Only one elderly great-uncle, who had watched our family dynamics unfold for decades, sent me a quiet private message. He had attended that birthday banquet and heard my father's speech in person. You have done nothing wrong, child. Loyalty only works both ways. They took your kindness for weakness. Stand your ground. That short message was my only validation from the whole family. It reminded me I was not being bitter. I was simply defending myself after years of exploitation. A couple of days later, Jackson showed up unannounced at my office building during busy working hours, trying to create a public scene in front of my colleagues and my management. He walked into the lobby wearing brand new clothes bought with the inherited money, putting on a fake reasonable tone loud enough for surrounding staff to hear that. "Clara, can you just act mature? Stop this stubborn grudge. My aunt and uncle are about to get evicted. Just send them money for a few months until I sort out my finances. You cannot let our family fall apart over your hurt feelings." I looked straight at him, completely unimpressed. "What exactly are you sorting out, Jackson? All the houses, all the savings, all the rental properties are legally yours now. You own everything. Why are you demanding I pay the living costs for assets that belong to you?" His polite mask crumbled right away, revealing his underlying entitlement. He shrugged shamelessly without any guilt. "I'm planning a big overseas trip and I want to buy a new sports car. I cannot waste my inheritance money on boring monthly household bills. That is what daughters are supposed to do." I felt stunned by his blatant greed. "You inherit the entire family fortune to spend on luxury trips and cars, while I keep working overtime to pay for the two people who gave you everything? That is not family. That is exploitation." Jackson's face flushed with anger. "You are only upset because you got nothing. You are just jealous of me." "I am not jealous," I answered firmly. "I am finally free from a one-sided obligation only I kept. You are upset because your free funding stream got cut off." Unable to win the argument, he huffed and stormed out of the building, leaving my coworkers staring at me with confused, curious looks. I did not stop to explain myself to everyone. I went back to my desk and finished my workday professionally, refusing to let his childish outburst destroy my peace of mind. A few days later, my father reached out and asked for a private meeting at the old neighborhood diner we used to visit when I was small. He insisted it should be only the two of us, no mother, no aunt, no Jackson. When I arrived, I barely recognized him. He looked exhausted, aged far beyond his 60 years. His shoulders slumped, his eyes heavy with guilt. For the first half hour we only made small talk, avoiding the painful subject. We talked about the old neighborhood, the diner's famous pancakes, the pets we had when I was kid. Eventually he set down his coffee mug and told me the full truth behind the birthday banquet and the gift documents. "Most of this pressure came from your aunt," he admitted quietly. "She has spent years feeding ideas into your mother's head. She kept saying Jackson had no future, that you already had a great career so you had no real need for our assets. Your mother craved being seen as the generous hero of the family. She wanted everyone to praise her for helping her sister's son. I knew deep down it was unfair to you. I knew you earned every bit of this legacy through all your hard work and sacrifice. But I avoided conflict. I did not want to fight within the family. I stayed silent, and I let them push this through. I will carry that regret." His honest admission hurt deeply. It was the first real acknowledgement of everything I had given. But the damage could not be undone. The legal papers were signed, assets were transferred, and 6 years of my life had already been spent. He told me he intended to hire a family lawyer to try reversing the gift deeds, but the mounting financial stress and constant family fighting were worsening his existing heart condition. In the weeks that followed, things spiraled further. Eviction notices became official court documents. Utility services were days away from being cut off. Property tax bills went unpaid. Jackson kept burning through the inherited cash on his own wants, refusing to contribute a single dollar toward my parents' crisis. My aunt held closed-door family meetings without me, all of them convinced I would eventually cave in, that my natural loyalty would make me resume sending money. They saw me not as their daughter, but as a guaranteed emergency backup wallet. One night I got a frantic late-night phone call. My father's heart condition had worsened drastically under all the stress. Paramedics rushed him to the emergency room. I rushed to the hospital, fear overriding all my anger. While doctors worked to stabilize him, my mother's first words to me were not worry for my father's life. She begged me to pull out my savings to cover hospital bills and stop the eviction. Even in that life-or-death moment, Her first priority was money from me that I told her softly but firmly. I have already given nearly every spare dollar I had to this family. Tonight I can only give you my presence. No more money. My father regained consciousness briefly while in hospital. He squeezed my hand weakly and told me I had done nothing wrong. He told me I must not burden myself with guilt for choosing my own life. Not long afterwards his condition deteriorated, and he passed away. He died before he could hire the lawyer, before he could undo the gift transfers. He died carrying his regret. Grief was complicated for me. I mourned my father, yet I could never fully get past the fact he stood by and let me be publicly disinherited on his own birthday. At his funeral the family toxicity boiled over once more. My aunt gave a eulogy that painted herself as endlessly devoted to our family, then threw a pointed public jab toward me, hinting I was selfish for abandoning my parents in hardship. All eyes turned toward me. Once again I was cast as the villain. This time I refused to stay silent. I stood up calmly, my voice clear enough for the whole funeral hall to hear. Before anyone judges me, ask why I sent $3,400 every month for 6 years. Ask why every single family asset was gifted entirely to Jackson. Ask who sacrificed, and who only kept taking. Several fair-minded relatives pulled me aside afterwards. I showed them my photos of the legal gift documents, my bank transfer records, and short clips from the birthday banquet speech. One cousin who worked in real estate law looked up the public county property records and confirmed every detail was factual. He shared the public official records into the family group chat. Overnight family opinion flipped completely. The shaming messages vanished, and many relatives sent apologies. Even Jackson's long-term girlfriend messaged me privately to express shock over everything that had happened. Vindication tasted bitter. Knowing I was proven right could never give back my 6 lost years, my savings, my delayed wedding and home plans that in the months that followed reality crashed hard for Jackson, my mother and my aunt. Jackson had burned through most of the liquid inheritance cash on trips and luxury purchases. The rental properties he owned stacked up unpaid taxes and maintenance fees. He held no stable full-time job, and he could not afford to sustain the houses he had been gifted. Tax liens landed on the properties, and foreclosure proceedings began. My aunt and my mother begged money from every relative they could think of, but nobody was willing to throw funds into their collapsing mess. There was no sincere apology to me. No admission of wrongdoing. Only more demands whenever every other option failed. Eventually their lawyer contacted me for a formal settlement meeting at the old family house. Before I reveal the final outcome, pause right now and leave a comment. Ask yourself honestly, if this was your life, after 6 years of sacrifice and public betrayal, would you pay large sums to rescue the family that cut you completely out? Would you bail out the cousin who stole your family legacy? Stay tuned for the powerful conclusion that when I arrived for the settlement meeting, the atmosphere inside the house was thick with desperation. The once warm family home felt cold and heavy. My mother looked frail and defeated. My aunt had lost her arrogant confidence. Jackson sat slouched in his chair, stressed as his easy wealthy lifestyle crumbled away. Their lawyer laid out their proposal. If I paid a lump sum of $26,100 within 48 hours to clear eviction debts, back taxes and penalty fees, they would amend and reverse all gift deeds. Every house, investment and heirloom would legally transfer back to me as sole owner. My mother reached across the table, grabbing my hand, repeating the lie that all of this had only ever been temporary for Jackson. As a project manager trained to spot hidden long-term risks, I immediately recognized the trap. If I paid that money to reclaim the assets, would also inherit all ongoing property expenses, insurance, repair bills, plus the endless family expectation I would keep financially supporting my mother indefinitely. I would pay thousands of my own dollars just to step right back into that exhausting one-sided sacrifice cycle I had escaped. I prepared a printed financial reconciliation report listing every payment I had made across 6 years, all dated and receipt verified. I slid the document across the dining table toward the lawyer and my family. I gave my final decision in a calm, steady voice. I will not pay the $26,100. I will not take back these assets. I will not re-enter this cycle of exploitation. You chose to give everything to Jackson at my father's birthday banquet. Therefore Jackson bears all responsibility for saving these properties. I bear none. My aunt jumped to her feet shouting. How can you be so cruel? Your mother gave you life. You owe her everything. Being born does not mean I owe my entire savings and future to people who intentionally betrayed me, I replied. Family sacrifice must go both ways. You took my devotion for granted, and now you live with the consequences. Jackson argued about family legacy and my grandfather's hard-earned work. Legacy is earned through loyalty and effort, I told him. Yours came from favoritism and betrayal. You never built any of this. It is not my job to rescue it for you. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Daughters are supposed to care for their parents in old age. Daughters are also supposed to be loved and valued in return, I answered gently but firmly. I can care for you emotionally as your daughter. But I will never again fund your lifestyle. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. I thanked the lawyer for his time, turned my back on that family house, and walked out the front door for good. A huge weight I had carried for 6 years lifted from my shoulders. I felt freed. In time the properties went to public county auction to settle unpaid taxes and debts. Jackson lost every single asset he had been gifted. His luxury car was repossessed. His girlfriend left him. He was forced to move away and take a demanding blue-collar job to survive. The relationship between my mother and my aunt completely shattered. They blamed each other for everything that had fallen apart, and they no longer speak to one another. I felt no joy in their misfortune. I was only relieved to be free of the toxicity. I helped my mother downsize into a small affordable senior apartment, assisted her in applying for government support and organizing her limited pension. We meet for coffee every few weeks, we talk about light, safe topics. There is kindness between us, but zero more financial obligations, no more manipulation. Our relationship is finally honest. That same year my fiancé and I finally held our wedding. We bought our first home, the one I had put off for 6 years. I restarted my career growth, took the overseas work opportunity one had once turned down, and built a happy stable future for myself. I learned one of life's hardest lessons: when quiet loyal people stop sacrificing for ungrateful family, that is not cruelty. That is self-preservation, that is self-respect. You do not owe anybody your life savings, your dreams, your youth, just because you share blood. That if you are watching this and you are the person always carrying everyone else's burdens, always giving while receiving very little in return, please remember you are allowed to choose yourself. Drop a comment below. Would you have walked away like I did, or would you have paid to save them? Subscribe for more calm drama stories about boundaries, self-respect, and family betrayal.